Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Vice President J.D. Vance assured Americans that they will have more money in their pockets after the growing pains of the new tariffs, and President Trump is sure a TikTok deal is imminent. Okay, let's get into it. After a federal judge formally dismissed corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams for good, Adams announced on Thursday morning that he will not run in the upcoming Democratic primary for mayor, but he will instead run as an independent in the general election for mayor this November. He's not quitting the Democratic Party, but simply not running in the Democratic primary. This is because the previous indictment took up too much of his time.
But the values of a working class base, pro-public safety, pro-worker, pro-quality of life, are still there, standing strong, even if many who share them have left the party. Those are my values, New York's values, and I will always fight for them. I had hoped to fight for them again in the Democratic primary for mayor, and more than 25,000 New Yorkers signed my Democratic primary petition. But the dismissal of the bogus case against me dragged on too long, making it impossible to mount a primary campaign while these false accusations were held over me. But I'm not a quitter. I'm a New Yorker. And that is why today, although I am still a Democrat, I am announcing that I will forego the Democratic primary for mayor and appeal directly to all New Yorkers as an independent candidate in the general election.
He also admitted that he made a mistake in trusting someone that he shouldn't have.
Leveled against me may have shaken your confidence in me, and that you may rightly have questions about my conduct. And let me be clear, although the charges against me were false, I trusted people I should not have, and I regret that.
With Adams dropping out of the Democratic primary, the November general election for New York City mayor is expected to be a four-way race. The candidates include Republican Curtis Sliwa and attorney Jim Walden, who is also running as an independent as well as Adams, and Democrat Andrew Cuomo. Whichever way you look at it, Adams dropping out of the Democratic primary is a better strategy. But the now dismissed federal charges did affect his campaign efforts. His support in the Democratic Party was down at 20% behind other potential opponents. Adams said, "I have been this racehorse that has been held back. This is so unnatural for me." In addition, his fundraising has slowed significantly, with many of his original political allies having switched to former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Many leaders have responded to President Trump's tariffs, and so has the business community. On Thursday, leaders from some countries and regions expressed interest in reaching an agreement to lower tariffs on U.S. exports.
And those tariffs have come in, and every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat. If we would have asked some of these countries, most of these countries, to do us a favor, they would have said, no, now they'll do anything for us. But we have tariffs, they've been set, and it's going to make our country very rich.
But are you open to deals with these countries if they're calling you?
Well, it depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you something that's so phenomenal, as long as they're giving us something that's good.
South Korea faces a 25% tariff, so Korean officials say that they are seeking negotiations, not retaliation. But Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada said on Thursday that Canada will hit back at the U.S. by imposing equivalent tariffs on U.S. passenger vehicles and a 25% tariff on U.S. vehicles that don't comply with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Canada's main stock index fell to a 3-week low on Thursday as energy and technology stocks plunged, and the Toronto Stock Exchange closed down 3.8%. It was the biggest drop since June of 2020. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said on Thursday that Mexico was exempted from U.S. additional tariffs because she maintains a good relations with the Trump administration. Sheinbaum also noted that she has had numerous conversations with President Trump about the tariffs and that negotiations are ongoing. Mexican and U.S. officials are expected to meet in Washington, D.C. next week. But French President Emmanuel Macron harshly criticized the new U.S. tariffs. He called on European Union companies to stop investing in the U.S. in talks with industry groups on Thursday. He said that he had not ruled out any response yet. France joins a group of countries that want the European Union to consider the strongest possible tariff retaliation against the U.S. for the first time. The retaliatory measures discussed include restrictions on U.S. trade and services, as well as on certain intellectual property rights, foreign direct investment, and public procurement channels. And Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says that she will do everything in her power to reach an agreement with the United States in order to avoid a trade war. The reasoning is that a trade war may inevitably weaken the West to the benefit of other global powers. The Beijing government also countered by announcing that starting on April 10th, it would impose a 34% tariff on U.S. origin imports on top of the current applicable tariff rate. Previously, even though some Chinese foreign trade practitioners believe that there is still room for negotiations between China and the United States, Morgan Stanley's chief economist for China, unlike some U.S. allies, thinks that the U.S. higher tariffs on China's exports is out of the protection of sensitive industries and the strategic goal of encouraging U.S. domestic investment and production means that the China and United States negotiation threshold and the tariff reduction threshold is now much higher. But it's not a good strategy for the CCP to immediately go for a hard countermeasure. The blowback could be catastrophic. Experts have estimated that China's economy could regress back to the level of the 1990s at this rate. And now Vietnam is willing to drop their tariffs to zero. Because it's hard for Vietnam to deal with the newly imposed 46% tariffs, they are interested in dropping them if they can reach an agreement. Chinese companies and retailers have used Vietnam as a shelter to circumvent the U.S. trade war with China. Today, President Trump said, "Just had a very productive call with To Lam, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, who told me that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to zero if they are able to make an agreement with the U.S. I thanked him on behalf of our country and said I look forward to a meeting in the near future." After President Trump announced the new round of trade tariffs, it sparked fears for some of a global recession. Global stock markets, the United States dollar, and oil all fell sharply. Early on Thursday morning, the S&P 500 index fell 3.4%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 1,200 points, or more than 2%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index fell 3.8%. Vice President J.D. Vance says that he won't shy away from the short-term pain that the Trump administration's massive tariff push could inflict on Americans. But he insisted that the U.S. needs a big change. He said, "We cannot keep going down the Joe Biden globalist path where we have $2 trillion of peacetime debt and deficits. We have manufacturing disappearing. That is not working for Americans. We've got to take this country in a different direction. Yes, this is a big change. I'm not going to shy away from it, but we needed a big change." Vance warned wage earners who are living paycheck to paycheck that things are unlikely to get better overnight. He said, "We know people are struggling. We're fighting as quickly as we can to fix what was left to us, but it's not going to happen immediately. We really do believe that if we pursue the right deregulation, if we pursue those energy cost-reducing policies, yes, people are going to see it in their pocketbooks. They're also going to benefit from the fact that foreign countries can't take advantage of us anymore. That means their jobs are going to be more secure." Vance further emphasized on Thursday that the tariffs would go hand in hand with anticipated tax cuts to reward hardworking Americans. He said, "We're going to cut taxes for American workers and for American companies that build here. We're going to make it harder to ship American jobs overseas. It's a total shift in the way we've done economic policy in the United States of America, but it was necessary. Yeah, we're going to cut your taxes. You're going to have more money in your pocketbook, and that's, of course, going to help you deal with the cost of inflation." On Thursday, Vice President J.D. Vance said that the Trump administration would reach a non-Chinese ownership agreement of TikTok by the April 5th deadline. That is, announce a U.S. buyer for TikTok. Vance said in an interview with Fox News, it'll come out before the deadline. We've got to wait a couple days to continue working on it to finalize some things, and of course, we're going to let the president announce whatever we ultimately decide. Vance also assured that the U.S. is in a favorable position. TikTok, the popular social media platform, could face a ban in the U.S. for the second time if its China-based parent company ByteDance fails to reach an agreement to sell part of its ownership by Saturday, April 5th. Speaking about potential security issues with TikTok on U.S. devices, Vance said it's important to make sure the TikTok app in the U.S. doesn't spy on users. President Trump says tariffs give the U.S. leverage to negotiate with the Chinese Communist Party.
For instance, with TikTok as an example, we have a situation with TikTok where China will probably say, we'll approve a deal, but will you do something on the tariff? The tariffs give us great power to negotiate. Always have. I've used them very well in the first administration, as you saw, but now we're taking it to a whole new level because it's a worldwide situation.
President Trump said on Sunday that a TikTok deal would be reached soon. President Trump told reporters on Air Force One, we're working on TikTok. We have a lot of potential buyers. There's tremendous interest in TikTok. According to CNN, Trump advisors, including Vice President J.D. Vance, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick presented the president on Wednesday with options for a deal to invest in TikTok, which included some wealthy venture capital, private equity funds, and technology companies, among others. Amazon and a consortium led by OnlyFans founder Tim Stokely are of the latest to join the bidding for TikTok. BlackRock is also in discussions to join ByteDance as a non-Chinese shareholder. Andreessen Horowitz, a private U.S. venture capital firm, is also in talks to increase outside funding to buy out the Chinese investors' stake in TikTok, the Financial Times reported on Tuesday. In an interview with News Nation, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the president wants to reach an agreement. He said he reserves the right to extend it if necessary. And today, President Trump announced that he will again delay enforcement of the TikTok sale or ban law for 75 days. President Trump said in a post on Truth Social, the deal requires more work to ensure all necessary approvals are signed. Bloomberg reported that European regulatory authorities found, after a lengthy investigation, that TikTok violated the European Union's General Data Protection Rule by transmitting its European user data to China for use by engineers. Ireland's Data Protection Commission is TikTok's main regulator in Europe. The fine is expected to be issued by the end of April. The fine could be the third highest amount issued to date by the Commission. It could be just behind the €746 million fine that was imposed on Amazon and the €1.2 billion fine imposed on Facebook's parent company Meta. But the exact amount of the fine and the timing of the decision have not been finalized and could still change. On Friday, the Constitutional Court of South Korea unanimously approved the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol, and they removed him from the office of president. The acting court chief read the court's 8-0 verdict, saying that Yoon's martial law decree did not meet the legal requirements for a national crisis, and Yoon violated the law by sending troops to the Korean National Assembly, allegedly to prevent a vote to revoke his decree. But Yoon Suk-yeol has denied all charges. Yoon Suk-yeol said that the declaration of martial law was not intended to impose military rule, but to issue a warning against the opposition party's abuse of power, emphasizing that it was meant to remind the nation to unite against anti-national forces. But good motives don't always lead to good results. The Constitutional Court's ruling makes Yoon Suk-yeol the second South Korean president to step down due to impeachment. With the Constitutional Court's announcement, Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office immediately. Now, South Korea must hold its next presidential election within 60 days. The sentencing has attracted national attention. 93,670 people applied for only 20 seats in the courtroom. That's 4,818 people vying for one seat. But Yoon did not attend court for the verdict, which was televised across the nation. His legal team cited considerations for public order and security. Anticipating a large number of supporters and opponents taking to the streets on this day, the Seoul authorities deployed more than 14,000 riot police throughout the city. Schools and stores in the vicinity of the Constitutional Court were all closed for security reasons. Yoon Suk-yeol's camp said after the verdict was delivered that they could not accept the results. In an interview with the media in front of the Constitutional Court after the verdict was announced, Yoon Suk-yeol's legal team accused the impeachment trial of not following the legal procedure from the beginning of the preparatory process and that the trial was not conducted in a fair manner. The lawyer's representative expressed regret over the result of the judgment. He thought that the court recognized the inevitable decision of the president, but he excluded political reasons, and he lamented that the justice's decision was made by looking at the details without considering the big picture. The crowd at the rally was in two moods, with Yoon supporters in tears of anger and pro-impeachment supporters chanting slogans and going wild. The Yoon supporters have expressed their intention to respond to Yoon's impeachment on the scale of the 419 revolution, which protested against South Korea's first president, Lee Sung-man. But whether this will lead to civil unrest in South Korea remains to be seen. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember that every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, we thank you. But please double check to make sure that you're still subscribed, because some of our audience have reported that they're somehow unsubscribed without their knowledge. We've also heard that many of you don't get notifications of our videos anymore on YouTube. So when you do subscribe on YouTube, please make sure to tap the notification bell as well. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.